As always, anything can happen, even if this world of exponential technologies. So,
yeah, the simplest things can trip us up, which is strange.
Can you see
true.
the presentation?
Yeah, no, it's working perfectly on your side. So thanks for that, Liesl.
Pleasure.
And as I was saying, we are delighted to have Jeff with us to talk through a couple of questions that we felt as a panel were useful to becoming a purposeful investor, which we think is very important in Africa, and a purposepreneur, which we've been promoting in the democratizing entrepreneurship community for some time now. So we really believe that we need a new model for economic development, and we see this as a bit of a wake up and shake up kind of session. So we'll just give people a few more minutes to join us. So
I think
keep posting in the chat, and you think we're ready to carry on?
I think we're ready to start, yes.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Liesl. So if you can go to slide 2, and I wonder where's that function to get control of the screen? I can't see it now. Okay. All right. Welcome, everybody. Thanks so much. We're super excited I've just requested remote control, Liesl. We're super excited to have Jeff Booth with us today. I'm Craig Blanche. I'm facilitating today, and I'm a serial entrepreneur and founder of the democratizing entrepreneurship community. Then we've got, sorry, Liesl, we're still on slide 2. Then we've got Nomkle Kanka with us, who's an investment banker, and she's really focused on the disenfranchised community and the upliftment of them. She's also chair of the National Foundation Dialogue Initiative, and she's the CEO of the Lutuli Foundation, and she's a founding member of the Women's Development Bank. Tanya Roeder is an entrepreneur, skills development and impact specialist, and a BEE implementer. And she's also Gauteng Regional Chair for ASDSA, the Association for Skills Development of South Africa. Shane Radford is an IBM greybeard with 30 years experience leading technology-enabled innovations and now focused on transforming and platforming ecosystems for exponential inclusive growth. Alistair Hofert is a change maker in artificial intelligence and innovation with over 23 years global experience at an executive business level. And then last but not least, we've got on our panel Brett Bowes, who's an entrepreneur, a businessman, and Madikwe Community Upliftment Chair. Ensuring sustainable inclusive communities around game lodges is just one of the projects he's involved in. But Brett's business is helping take advantage of Africa's latent opportunity. Brett, I wanted you to just give us your view on Africa's latent opportunity before we formally welcome Jeff. Brett, are you there? Can anybody see Brett? Huh? No? Okay. No. I don't know what's happened to Brett. I can't see him, Liesl. I don't know if you can see him. And I'm not hearing anybody either. Anybody hear me?
I can see Brett is on mute.
Brett, you're on mute.
He's just dropped off again.
He's having challenges. All right. Yeah. So Jeff describes himself we'll carry on. Jeff describes himself as a technology entrepreneur and reluctant author. He's the founder of Build Direct, which started in his garage and was listed at over $1 billion market cap. And he's also the author of The Price of Tomorrow: Why Deflation is the Key to an Abundant Future. Today, we're going to focus a little bit more on the abundance part. So welcome, Jeff. As you know, I'm a huge fan. I've read your book twice and I've recommended it to many people. I know that you're a long-term optimist and you believe that we're moving towards a world of abundance. And you've also been pretty vocal about entrepreneurship being fundamental to creative destruction and exponential innovation. The Price of Tomorrow, on the other hand, is a lesson in economics and the deflationary effects of technology on the other hand, the cumulative negative effects of inflationary monetary policy. But we know that technology will make things cheaper and better and will hopefully win over inflationary monetary policy. So let's call that for a given for now. Any sign of Brett yet? Because he's up next in any case.
I'm back, Craig.
You're back. Okay, so Brett,
Yeah.
I carried on with the intro of Jeff while you were offline. But if you could go to your little bit of why Africa's latent opportunity is how you see it and what it is.
Yeah. So hi everybody. My normal job is all about actually making Africa grow. And the question I've really got for this webinar, and I think Jeff for you, is Africa out of poverty to be a real global player. And it's both possible and exciting, I believe, because we have two exponential processes that overlay each other. And this creates an extraordinary opportunity if we do the right things. So when I was at school, 4 + 4 = 8, right? But 4 to the power of 4 is actually 256. That's 30 times more growth than 4 + 4. That's how exponential works. And the two parts, the two kind of enabling possibilities that are both exponential are the following. The first is that actually Africa's organic growth potential itself is exponential without tech. By 2060, we're going to have 25% of the world's population living here. And then you overlay the exponential effects of better education, food security, continued growth and democracy on the continent, continued growth over the rule of law, and the new Africa Free Trade Agreement, which started in January. And you get a really exciting space. Anyway, we're much in the same position as India or China were 25 years ago. Now imagine if we overlay that with the exponential power of tech in its current state, because when China and India were starting, tech it was doing stuff, but not doing the kind of things it's doing now. It actually gives me goosebumps to think of the possibilities of these two things happening at the same time. We just need to unblock attitudes. We need to do things differently. We simply need to adopt stakeholder-based capitalism and dose it with the liberal helping of exponential tech. And then I really do believe that the sky's the limit for the continent. And that's really what I wanted to start off with. I am a complete optimist. So you might accuse me of all of those things, but I really do believe it. Okay. Craig, do you want me to go straight on to this slide?
Yes, go straight on to you.
Okay. So
have you?
Please, could we please ask that you mute yourself? We are recording. Thanks, Brett.
Okay, so Jeff, this question's for you. Colonialism, apartheid, crony capitalism, and greedy politicians have all left their mark on Africa quite badly. But changes are having a dramatic effect on the growth rate already. If you look at the top 10 growing countries in the world, 6 of them are from Africa. The continent's projected to grow considerably faster than the rest of the world for the next 40 years. How can exponential technology and purposeful investment accelerate the growth?
Thanks, Brett. First of all, I totally believe in everything you just said, and super bullish on Africa in general. What I would say is what you talked about in kind of a banking sector and everything else, and the way that money is actually kind of formed, is connected to a lot of the things that happen in Africa and hurt that. Same as in India and everything else. And what's changing today, led by Bitcoin is one of those changes, but by decentralized money, is going to fix that system in time. But the bigger change that's coming is a change to digital systems. And when you think about digital systems overall, we used to buy records or CDs, and we used to buy that music so that we could get one song. And today, in a different delivery format, we have access to all music. The same thing happened for cameras. We used to look at, we used to only take certain amount of photography. And even though Kodak invented the digital camera, they missed that we have an abundance in photos today, and they're almost free. And a different business model took advantage of that. And so as you project out what is happening in a switch to digital infrastructure, in a switch to more solar infrastructure, a lot of times the incumbents don't have the advantage. It's the upstarts with fresh thinking that aren't encumbered to their previous assets. They don't have to make their other thing work, that they have the advantage. The advantage, in other words, the advantage moves to entrepreneurs. The advantage moves to people that can project patterns, how fast the world's moving, and be able to solve those problems, not the way they were solved before in the old world, solve them in a new way. And so there's a really big advantage for kind of a fresh start.
Okay. So I'm pleased that you said that, because I mean, ultimately, if we can bring the cost of doing the traditional things way, way down in Africa, then overlaying all the other things that are naturally happening on the continent, which is really often overcoming the hurdles that we put in front of ourselves, we've got a real chance. So following on from that, assuming that purposeful investors will step up to the plate, so that the model of capitalism will actually change, and we will have more people thinking, I want to make a profit, but I want to do good at the same time, and believing that that's possible. What do we need to do to get governments, big business, and tech to enable this optimization of tech democratization, and to reduce the costs, as you've just talked about, in electricity and photography and all of these other things? How do we actually get them to move their asses? Because government and big business are not the fastest of movers.
You don't. If you spend your, and I'm sorry, but if you spend your time there or blaming that, there's no chance to. You have to create the pressure by winning a market to be able to turn something else to want to change it. You have to create a 10x type of advantage to the market, and it's all and so entrepreneurs are going to do it no matter what. They do it for a different reason. A lot of time, and a lot of times those entrepreneurs fail because of the same thing. They miss the timing and everything else. But I would say, if you're reliant on somebody else, like big business or government, if you believe you're reliant on that, you typically don't take the step to change. So and what creates an ecosystem is quite honestly a whole bunch of failures of people that are going to do it anyways, and then a success or two that gets other people to say, wow, it is possible here. It becomes a lightning rod and everything else for change. And it always happens with, it can happen if the government is supportive. It can, but that is not the space that you can typically make change. It's too slow, especially in a world that's moving as fast as it is today.
Okay, so if we're looking for rising tides, it's not going to be the government, and it's not going to be traditional big business. It may be a wave of climate change positivity. It may be a wave of young people thinking the world is an unequal place, and that's wrong. So we can take advantage of those social changes.
Exactly. And if it doesn't come from there, if big business from there, it doesn't, you might have big business from somewhere else support it because they want to support the region and they want to be early. But it takes the entrepreneur to show that opportunity.
Okay. Good. So, we won't wait for them.
So I think that introduces the kind of discussion around unicorn versus zebra. If you look at the global startup VC world, everybody's chasing that big $1 billion plus the unicorn. The challenge on the one hand with that is it's making a few people richer, as we know. On the other hand, what it's doing is we're bringing global competition into Africa to get the local organizations and corporates to start to have to move faster. There's always been a debate that Africa's 5-10 years behind the rest of the world. So with that in mind, how do we get the balance right to shift from an exclusive to an inclusive investor market? How do we get, we need funding to be able to facilitate the change, but how do we start to get the investors to drive a more purposeful, inclusive mindset and approach to funding?
Well, even if you just look at this framework that you put unicorn and zebra, and the bias here is let's create zebras, and then that bias creates an inability to fund if you're looking for VCs that are comparing opportunities elsewhere that are unicorns and yours. And so today, and this is a huge part of my book. Today, you have money printing trying to drive prices up, and you have technology trying to drive prices down. And technology is going to win in the end, but money printing is what people are doing. So so in that environment, and by the way, that same environment is the wealth divide. So inflation is the same as wage deflation. So as you're driving prices, as you're trying to inflate and try to drive inflation, you're actually driving wages, and so you're driving society to the breaking point, and it's terrible. But in that environment, there's going to be capital pools that have tons of capital that are trying to as well beat a negative return of cash. And so they're investing in what they would see is the best way to do that. And so if your company doesn't have ambitions to be a big company, then you've taken out a whole bunch of investors. That doesn't mean you can't win. It doesn't mean you can't win, set up a profitable operation right away and everything else. But because of network effects primarily, companies can take winner take all markets. And network effects make them stronger and stronger and stronger. That's why Google looks like Google. That's why Facebook. That's why these companies gain so much power, because the network gets stronger and stronger and stronger. So if you're competing against a company like that for capital, and you say I'm just going to be a small company, that it sends a signal to maybe that's not worth capital.
So that kind of comes to the next conversation around, we've engaged government you've spoken about, but we've engaged government who arguably should be driving the entrepreneurial state, if we use some of the other global economists, Mariana's book. We've engaged a lot of big business, we've engaged a lot of global business, but that mindset of short-termism and that linear versus the patient capital, the patient commitment to the medium longer term, which you need for the network effect. What are the things that you might have seen or you could advise us around dealing with this deception of the exponential? And how do we overcome that mindset and get that case a lot stronger?
So the business model has to be something that can change, that make an impact on the world, make an impact on people, make an impact in the world, first in probably a local market, and then that can expand from there. And then the team and the CEO and founders have to credibly deliver that message over and over and over again. And by credibly deliver that message, there has to be some sort of evidence. So you typically would raise a really small amount of money or none and prove a thesis. And then you would expand on that once you have evidence, and you would raise more money, and you'd raise more money. And somewhere along that curve, and by the way, a lot of companies, even with lots of money, go broke in that phase. If you look at WeWork or others, they're just bad business models. So it doesn't, just having capital doesn't mean it's a good business model and it'll work. It has to deliver tons of value that makes the network stronger to be able to have evidence that it's more and more and sustaining on the other side. So, but that all comes from a vision and really hard execution against that, and all the learning that comes along with that. And one of the things I look at it when I think about pitching to investors, that vision, every time, so most people won't understand it because you might be early and everything else, but every time you're pitching to an investor and they don't understand something, you have an opportunity to sharpen your pitch. So the more you do that, the more you practice that, the better you get at it. And you hear from investors who see everything. So those investors that see everything, they've seen other things like yours before and everything else. So the questions that they ask you will give you a sense of what they're thinking in times. So but that road is really, a lot of times it's a crazy vision. That I'll give you an example that goes directly to your chart here. Today, and one of the reasons China grew so fast is essentially for cheap labor, US exported their factories to China. And now China could produce cheaply, US had money, and it worked really well for a long time. And it became the production capacity of the world. Your chart here, that won't happen in the future. It'll look different. So if Africa tries to copy that model by having lower labor rates than China, it doesn't seem like a very good model when we have exponential technology like 3D printing that's getting better and better and better. And so now, what is a product in the first place? If you think about what a product is, it's just information in my head. Let's use a chair, for example, that I decide my chair is going to be better than everyone else's chair. And I take that chair and I take it to China to have it produced at scale. First a prototype. Will people buy my chair? Then at scale and shipping containers to ship it across into distribution, warehousing, and retail stores so people can buy my chair. And then I market against my chair. And I say to everybody, my chair is the best in the world. And every other person manufacturing chairs does the same thing against me, when it is just a piece of information in my head. How that information will look against 3D printing is within the next 10 years, maybe faster, there will be a Google for information and 3D printing. And it'll be, you'll print it in your home or down the street, and it'll be effectively free. And you'll have unlimited chairs or anything else, because it's just information sitting that's moving, and that entire supply chain of everything else is going to be removed. And so it creates an opportunity to create a crazy big business. I haven't heard anybody talking about a business like that yet. We might still be early. And so but it's coming. So they're just an example to base on your chart. But most people wouldn't see that type of example because they're so caught in the day-to-day of what it looks like today.
That's great. Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, I mean, Jeff, it reminds me, just to maybe give it a little bit more practical context in the current reality. There's a company called MX3D in Amsterdam that has robotic arms printing bridges that actually, the robotic arm starts on the side of the river, and then it actually prints the bridge and develops across.
I've seen it.
Building the bridge. I'm sure you've seen it. Google it if you're watching and you haven't seen it. But over to Alistair. Alistair, are you there?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Sorry about that. Jeff, as a precursor to the question that I'd like to ask over here, many of the technologies on the right-hand side I personally work with. And I've watched it. I've been in technology for 20 plus years odd. And what I've noticed specifically with AI, like we used to see like Moore's law of 18 months. Today, AI has become the granddaddy, which is its capability because of data and computing power doubles every 3 months, which is insane. So the capability of that combined with things like IoT and blockchain at the same time, not just for like immutable records, but the convergence of those technologies together. I've watched, and this is not scripted on like what I wanted to ask, but watching that in the past 12 months has been like, the word exponential is not correct. I thought I used to understand what might come in the future, but I don't. It's just moving so fast. And I guess, given that, it's the equivalent of creating the fastest deflationary opportunity in the history of humankind, which is the precursor to this question: is how can we harness some of those statements I've made to create abundance of opportunity in Africa?
So it's so funny that you said that. So you just tied into a whole bunch of same themes, because I sit in an intersection of this all the time, and it is moving. It's impossible to comprehend how fast things are moving. It's all in AI. It's almost frightening. If you took the other side, it's advancing so fast, and business doesn't come from one of these technologies alone. Typically, it doesn't come from, okay, I created an AI company. There's not really such thing as an AI company. It comes together with another thing that what an entrepreneur sees is, wait, this type of technology with this over here creates something entirely new. And it's that orthogonal thinking that creates the something new that changes the existing incumbent can't compete with. And you touched on another thing. It's massively deflationary. It brings prices down at a level that we can't even comprehend. If you look at your phone, everything's free on your phone. Why do you use that technology? Is because you get abundance for almost nothing. And people assume that the phone and say all those apps that are free because they're paid advertising, and it's not true. An app on a phone, you write a line of code for a flashlight on your phone, and you never have to write a line of code again, and it scales infinitely. It's free. And the point of technology is to free our time. And we've lived in a monetary policy forever that is trying to increase prices against that free. So if you effectively ask the reason I wrote my book is because nobody was putting those pieces together. And so so if you try to print money into something that the world, if innovation and this rate of change in technology should be making everything cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, and things to the point of free, most things would be free. But when economic policy stops that from happening, or we say we want more growth, but we don't realize growth today with this picture that you just put up, growth today is negative. That's what the entrepreneurs are doing. They're driving, information is moving to be free. And we're building new, essentially, instead of roads and bridges, the super highways or information highways. And on top of that, it becomes free or almost free. And the entrepreneurs if you look at every single monopoly company that you use, that I use, and everything else, forget in different regions, but I'm talking tech companies, we celebrate prices coming down all the time. That's why we use Google, because it's free. That's why we use Amazon, because the products get cheaper and cheaper, and we have abundance of any product we want, and then we get next day shipping, and then we add movies for free or almost free. So that's the point of technology, and that mindset is a very different mindset than how we built the world over the last 100 years.
Perfect. Thanks, Jeff. I would normally follow up with quite a few questions on that, which is leading for good opportunity in Africa. But if we can just chat about, on the previous slide, I chatted about a few technologies. There are maybe 25, 30, in fact, I think it goes up to 100 exponential technologies that are sitting out there today they're both exploding and converging at the same time. And what might be super useful is for people on the call to understand, like, what are we looking out for? If you're an entrepreneur in Africa and you have access to this and you can put this in the hands of people, such as those on the call, what should we look out for in terms of, there are many exponential technologies out there, and you can't just absorb all of them, and you can't just use everything that you see out there. We're typically used to seeing, like, pick a problem and then you solve the problem and then you wrap technologies around that and you wrap multiple technologies. But it would be super useful to understand from you, like, what is an exponential technology and why is it so important today and not like 5 years ago?
Yeah, so all of these are moving at a rate that so forecasting the rate of change and when something becomes commercially viable. So a lot of let's take energy as an example, because I think it's important. I just heard just before this call that you sometimes have blackouts or an ability. So it obviously seems like a problem that everybody's waiting for government to solve, and everything, and energy. An important part of the whole process of what we just talked about before about that deflation and driving better value is economic viability. And so something has to reach economic viability. And ultimately, typically in technology companies, the startup needs a 10 times advantage versus the incumbent to be able to break monopoly power. So it needs to have a really big advantage. And so you're forecasting those advantages against an exponential path of price declines against technology. But if you just looked at energy today, so most energy is not around solar today, but solar is now one of the cheapest energy sources, and it's declining every year. And so if you're forecasting that decline and saying, wait, there's a problem here and it's because of a grid, the grid might look differently later. The entire grid could be more localized and around solar and backup. And so those create opportunities. Energy is the number one input of every other industry. So a whole bunch of other industries don't work because energy cost is too high. Take desalination, probably pretty important for regions in Africa. Doesn't work or it's economically unviable. But combine lower cost energy, it changes that formula, and it opens up a whole bunch of other industries as a byproduct. And each of these and your other 100 similarly, it's hard to go into all of these, but what I would say is I'm staggered by how many opportunities there are. I cannot keep track. I can't keep up to the time, even my own time in companies asking me to be on boards, or that in some cases I want to say yes because they're so incredible and everything else. And there's just not enough time because there's just so much happening right now.
Thank you, Jeff. It doesn't have to be answered now because we're going to hand over to the next person. But, as an entrepreneur, if you see, for example, government and public sector is moving super slow, we would probably want to find a way that we can work faster than them and get past that, like, slowdown mechanism, if there's a way, which is kind of part of what that question was. Perhaps not for now, but just to plant a thought there in terms of how might we elegantly work with government, but faster than those structures.
So, and I can answer it really quickly because it ties into one of the last questions. You lead, and you force a change because of leading, and because the market starts to understand, wow, this is important. And the same thing you're doing with investors and everything else, how important this idea is. And then along the way, governments typically come on side and help, but they need to see a lead first from typically private industry. That's essentially, governments move when there's enough backlash from community. They have to move.
Thank you, Jeff. Super valuable.
Over to you, Namhle.
Yeah.
Is that better? Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Jeff, I think last year we had our fair share of challenges when the whole world was locked down, and that put us into a state of watching all of these dystopia binge series where we understand what the world would look like without energy. The technology was there, but the energy wasn't there. Looking at an Africa Rising scenario, can you lift us up and give us some idea of the advances in the future of energy production, especially ones that you could highlight that would be relevant to the African continent? We are vast. In some areas, we are dense. In other areas, we are sparse. The energy mix is always going to be a challenge for any government. And that challenge is highlighted by the fact that they actually don't spend a lot of time thinking about the advances in that space. What can you tell us about that today?
And it ties into something that it said before. Typical systems and distribution systems in how in the last 100 years of work, and in energy is no different. We rely on a central grid, and so we're kind of stuck into a central grid mindset, begging government to change the central grid. And they have no idea how fast things are changing or the economic viability of what's happening with energy. And in Africa, for instance, this way more sunlight than there is in Canada. And so that's an advantage to a solar grid. And it doesn't need to be centralized like it needs to be for a central grid. You can decouple that, and it can be a decentralized grid. And it can, yes, you need energy at night. Yes, you need energy when the sun doesn't shine. You need backup, but with battery storage and other things that are happening, it changes the nature of how energy goes to market. And if that creates a huge, what I'm hearing with a whole bunch of what I've heard on this call is, and I'm not sure that would, I don't know Africa well enough, but it sounds like a huge problem that needs somebody to solve it. And by the way, just so you know, if you want a whole bunch of money to solve that problem, there's a whole bunch of solar providers, people that care about that a lot, ESG folks that care about Africa and climate change and everything else, that just might help you solve it. And so, but it needs local. It needs a plan that, here's what I'm going to do in a small region first around this. Here's why this is economically viable today. Here's a projection of where it goes. Here's all of the thing and how I'm going to create that business. And what ends up happening is that business solves so many other people's pain that it changes the world. Those are the types of things that and then because energy is so important for other economic viability and life and everything else can change from that.
That makes a lot of sense. So then, bringing what we've been talking about together, the earlier discussions about the exponential technologies, Alistair and his, I guess, the gobsmack effect of AI. When we bring all of those together, and let's say we have really innovative ways of dealing with the energy issues, how do we use that to act counter to history, to create more opportunities rather than capitalize or monopolize on the opportunities that we find? Because that actually inhibits further exponential growth.
So this is a bigger question, and and this is the question in my book. So we have two forces fighting each other right now. Entrepreneurs using exponential technology to deliver more for society. And if you let that force win, what would happen is the broad-based gains from society that are gained get distributed to society. That's a natural outcome of a free market and kind of entrepreneurship and free market entrepreneurship and exponential technologies. And so prices would fall super fast. And the entrepreneurs that are doing that as a byproduct, you only win when you deliver value to society. And you don't win way more than everybody, tens of billions, because the market's competitive. So prices keep coming down, and as labor comes out of the market, prices keep coming down. That's what ends up happening. Fighting that system with an inflationary monetary policy concentrates wealth in the hands of very few. And so if you looked at, I use this example, the game board of Monopoly. And if you land on certain places around the board before somebody else does, you end up with a whole bunch of houses early. And it might just be because of luck, because you landed on the right places. But imagine, and then the game gets easier for you because you collect more rents. And it gets easier and easier and easier until somebody loses. What if that game would never stop? And the winners kept getting more and the losers kept getting less, but central banks wouldn't let the game stop? What would happen to society? That's what's happening. So the bigger story, people are self-interested. I wish that was different, but they want to solve they're creating these businesses so they can feed their families, so they can win more of a share. And if you allow the rules to allow that to happen so that it's fair for everybody, then everybody wins by that benefit. The entrepreneurs that win big markets win more of their share, but not like it looks like today. So that we have a fundamental, all we have to do, and that's actually, by the way, here's a really interesting idea tied to that energy idea. Solar in some cases is free, and there's too much energy produced by it for a grid to handle right now in a lot of places, completely free. And so utility companies are having troubles with that. But what if you created a new type of utility where you mined Bitcoin when during high sun and everything else, so that you created value when you couldn't use the energy somewhere else? And so you combine two things. And by the way, Bitcoin is one of those things that is actually a forcing function for what we're talking about. So technology today requires a currency that allows for deflation. Otherwise, you concentrate wealth and power.
Thank you, Jeff.
You bet.
So Tanya,
Hi,
you're up.
Yep.
There we go.
Hi, Jeff. So I'd like to find out, there's been a lot of discussions, and you mentioned that there's a lot of opportunity in Africa as well. So Africa's always been very rich in its resources, in the finite resources such as copper, diamonds, gold, platinum. But the entrepreneurs of today, and from what I see in terms of Africa and just around the world, is they are much more younger generation, and with social media also all coming into play, and impact means much more to them, and I think that's where the term purposepreneur comes in. So in terms of the entrepreneurs that we're looking at that's coming out of Africa, if you were an entrepreneur in Africa, what type of business would you potentially look at setting up, and how would you integrate technology into that, bearing in mind that we currently in Africa have issues. We mentioned earlier on that we have load shedding in South Africa at the moment, where our grid just our government's entity that handles the electricity and manages that and distributes that, there's a challenge with that at the moment. And so we have load shedding where across the country there's areas that's scheduled to have no electricity. And what business would you set up if you were in Africa, and how would you integrate technology into it?
So I think technology first in everything. So it's not integrate technology into it. It's where is technology going and forecasting the trends in each of those individual technologies. And where's the intersection of these technologies that creates economic value, that once I reach that tipping point, even if I forecast out that tipping point, that it's going to be somewhere in a couple of years, and I'm going to start before somebody else gets there. Once I've reached that tipping point, it gets better and better and better from there, either from the technology moving cheaper and cheaper or a network effect that I build into my design of the technology. And here's an example, and I think it's important. A lot of entrepreneurs start with something way too big so you want to be the biggest fish in the smallest pond. Mm-hmm. So if you said I'm going to go attack solar, you could say that as the big vision, but you want to start it in one area as a proof point, and what you're going to do to there and tell investors, after I do this well and prove this out, here's the trends, here's what I'm going to do to scale it across other areas. So that would be an example, and using that example and just tying it to Tesla. Tesla started at the Roadster, a high-cost car, and remember what he did. He sold the car that he could not deliver until 2 years later, forecasting the trends of technology, and delivered it 2 years later, but he charged people deposit early. So it was proof to a whole bunch of investors that there was a bunch of demand. That if he tried to deliver it right then, he couldn't, because the technology didn't enable him to. So he forecasted the trend, delivered it 2 years later, and he used the same model. And then as the technology came down, he scaled that into the model, the other models of cars, to be able to open up a bigger audience. So when people see monopoly power, they think that company always started with a broad-based offering, but it very rarely starts there. So Google too, they look at Google, what Google is today, and they forget what Google looked like. Google went after a market that was free. Everybody else charged for advertising, and Google gave free search. And as everybody built to it and everybody used it, now they could monetize it a whole bunch of different ways and move from search to a whole bunch of different other industries. If they went and said to the world that we're going to do everything right away, Microsoft would have seen them earlier and stopped that. So typically what ends up happening is you want to be the biggest fish in the smallest pond, while having an idea of where you're really going.
Okay, that's quite interesting. So, if I think about South Africa, for example, 4IR, and that is growing quite big at the moment. But in terms of entrepreneurs, there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there that are doing good things, but to integrate technology into it is so costly, and this leads into my next question in terms of having bigger businesses or government coming into play and assisting, with just supporting those entrepreneurs. But my thing that I want to understand is, for entrepreneurs in Africa, to integrate technology, and I know you're saying start with technology, look at those forecast it and look at the trends, but the technology to develop for whatever product it might be is so vastly, it's out of the particular entrepreneur's budget, because obviously they're trying to survive within an environment that has lots of challenges. And our challenges range from hunger and unemployment, and it also goes back to an earlier point, in terms of deflation. So when you have this abundance, and it drives deflation and it drives wages down. But in a country like ours and in Africa, where we actually need to survive on income, how does that come into play? Because it's difficult for entrepreneurs who are not tech savvy or don't have that idea. So we might still lag behind quite far in terms of having technology brought into our offerings.
So and that is the problem. That monopoly game board I talked about, it gets harder and harder and harder because of the economic policy of the world trying to drive inflation. And we should expect that to continue. And I hate to say that. because it shouldn't continue. But I've seen no evidence of governments trying to stop that. In fact, they're printing more money and making it worse. And so, but a different conversation. It is not that the technology is really hard or costly. It's that the knowledge feels too far away for them to gain. The technology is in a lot of the cases, AI, a whole bunch of this, by going into web services and different technologies. If people understood what technology, go to GitHub and different technologies. The technology is virtually free. It's the knowledge of how do I access that technology and how do I write that code, or who do I hire that people think they need somebody else to be able to do it, which is really expensive, and it's not. It's changing so dramatically that it's almost free. My first company, it cost me, it was 2 years, just over 2 years, and over $5 million of investment, mine and a whole bunch of friends, family, and elsewhere, and almost lost the business in that first 2 years to be able to develop the first part of the technology that could enable the business. So for 2 years, we couldn't do anything. That same technology, that actually way better technology, and that was 18 years ago, way better technology, I could get could get for $50 a month right now.
That's quite interesting. Thank you. I think in Africa we do just, as you say, we need to access the knowledge, but I think as we need to educate other entrepreneurs. You know, for the entrepreneurs that are in tech and understand tech, they actually need to educate other entrepreneurs and look at how to assist them in scaling and moving forward and integrating that technology. Thank you. You've given me a lot to think about. Very valuable.
Absolutely. I want to jump in there quickly before Nomclair comes back on. So, Jeff, this is exactly why we've created this community to democratize entrepreneurship, because we believe to democratize entrepreneurship, we have to democratize and create the knowledge nuggets. So we have to democratize education as well. And, you know, because what we found is that perception of it's a leap too far, it's too complicated, it's too difficult, is a big constraint in general. And the more we can create, you know, this sharing of this kind of information and even more abstract and simplified aspects of the information that people can easily consume, the better we'll be off. Over to you, Nomclair.
Craig, I think Nomclair froze. I don't know if you would like to continue with the question in the meantime.
Oh, wow. So, I mean, this is a big one. Shane, will you do me a favor and try and get Nomclair, give us some help, see if maybe it's the power, the power omen that has taken control of our, where we wanted to go. Yeah. Nomclair's back.
Thank you. The gremlin in the system. Sorry about that, Jeff. And that, what just happened is an example of why we just keep looking forward. We need to look at how we restructure things, rebuild, rethink, reimagine. And quite a while ago, the 2013 Sustainable Development Goals, 2030 Sustainable Development Goals were put into place. They're goals without any lanes, without any tracks to take us there. One had to be really creative about how to get there. And as you've pointed out, if we use the traditional mechanisms of getting there, we may or may not arrive at our destination, but we'll certainly do it in the slowest and most expensive way possible. So how do we attract the kind of impact investments that feed into our way of thinking that will help us achieve those 2030 SDGs?
Okay. So if I look at just about every one of these, they're in conflict with the monetary policy. So when a government says they want to create inflation so that they can give you more money, so they print more money to try to So they hold prices high unnaturally, so more people can't afford those prices. And then they have to give more money to the people in poverty just to be able to live and pay for their food, because they can't pay for the high prices that were created unnaturally. And so when I think about most of these, and when you think about climate change, if you think about climate change and just what we're talking about right now, solar is additive to the energy grid, and it not free, but it's almost free, and it's getting cheaper and cheaper every year. And it's additive to the, so that is deflationary. So it should be bringing down prices, not just of energy, but it should be bringing down prices of everything that energy is required for. And that seems pretty natural. It seems that is not a stretch to say every year from now, energy should get cheaper. Why is energy not getting cheaper? Because the existing system has to increase the price of oil to keep us growing forever, or the existing system collapses, because it's all based on inflation. And so you have to, so you print more money to increase the price of oil. In other words, you're slowing down the rate of change, because you're trying to, so it's driving the biggest, ironically, the biggest impact to climate change is monetary policy, because it's got an embedded growth phenomenon that you have to grow forever, and which is impossible with where technology is going. So so you have to dilute the technology that's driving the other way. You're having to push prices up to counteract it. So a lot of these goals are in conflict today with monetary policy. So it makes it really difficult to achieve. That being said, this is where I'd like, and it's the same reason I wrote the book. What entrepreneurs do is they see something that is unjust, that doesn't work, and a whole bunch of people are getting hurt, and they don't care. They're going to go fix it. And they might have to work 20 hours a day. They might have to learn a whole bunch of lessons. They might fail everything else, but they don't blame anybody. They look themselves in the mirror every day and they go and fix it. And the drive that connects other people to that mission to connect to it is what drives everybody else in. And it creates a community and everything else. And when some of those entrepreneurs are successful at breaking through the status quo, others want to copy that and emulate it. So, and that becomes a huge drive to, so it's kind of self-responsibility. Now, I do realize that if you've never seen the world I'm talking about, because you're in poverty and you're worried about paying your putting food, it's so hard for somebody to even relate to what I'm talking about. But I'll use an example of one of these that you have, I think, or you said, I can't see it here, education.
Right.
When I went to school, and still today, people pay to the best universities and everything else, and hundreds of thousands of dollars over 4 years. And why do they do that? Because they believe that it'll give them an advantage to get a job later. When today education's already free. It's already free. It's a concept that we believe the only reason we stay in school for that long is on a previous concept and a previous reality that it took going to school to get the best jobs. Today, that's not true. Today, education is effectively free. Information's free. You could get to the best researchers, the best everything in any topic you want. Khan Academy is free. My kids learn more on Khan Academy than they do in school. And you could, and anything, you could go as deep as you wanted on any topic. Your time is not free, but if you chose to say, I'm going to overcome this myself, I don't need any, education's free today. And I can tell you from hiring thousands of people, I would hire the curious person that's constantly driving every time over the person that kind of had it all into an education system, because they're always curious. They're always learning.
You know, that's a pretty amazing way of looking at things. And it's upside down, quite frankly, to the reality of most people in Africa. How do we direct our future into something that seems almost counterintuitive? We're a continent that is actually trying to build institutions. We're driving towards a more concrete structure. How do we create the kind of vision and future that is so different, and people are willing to accept that counterintuitiveness because it gives us a future-proof Africa?
It's one at a time. It's asking questions that seem to challenge the status quo. And when you say how do we, it's how do I. It's and so that question that I just asked about education, I'll bet you just you and just very few people on this call even realize that. And once you ask that question and you pose on what does it actually look like, you realize that what I believe might not be true anymore. And once you understand that, you realize how much power you have to change a whole bunch of other things. But if you believe you're a victim of the system and you need the education, you need to get to the school, or you're a victim of the government in power, or you're a victim of big business not being able to invest in your business, if you believe that, it is true. And while it might be hard to step outside because you've never stepped outside, it is not true. Your beliefs control where you go. And there's so much opportunity to change those beliefs. So a lot of it is just by asking big questions.
So it really is about our perspective more than anything. We just need to be prepared to change the way that we look at things. If it starts with us, then we can find creative ways of redirecting investment in the right places
Exactly.
to entrepreneurs and into the continent.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much, Nonclair. And Jeff, that kind of leads to something that Liesl posted, which is about how the importance of the entrepreneurial mindset. And I really like your point that it's not we, it's I. Each of us need to adopt and leverage and embrace this entrepreneurial mindset. Wouldn't you like to elaborate on that a bit, Brett? Jeff, sorry. What is an entrepreneurial mindset really? How do we get people to embrace an entrepreneurial mindset?
So to me, it's about Craig. It's about two almost that will feel counterintuitive to get together, but two distinct traits. Number one, I'm responsible for every single thing in my life. 100% responsible. That is easy to say. I'm not. I blame somebody else, or I can't do this because of this. And if you can't eat, if you can't do it, it's way harder. But if you take control of your own responsibility, because every time you blame somebody else, you paralyze yourself. So what I think about in everything I do, everything that I create in the world is my own responsibility. And what that drives into me myself is a rate of learning that there's no place to hide. If I don't like the view around the world around my world, it's me. It might be true that I meet somebody that takes advantage of me. It might be true that something else happens. By the way, it is true. We all have scars and everything else and make mistakes. But if I don't succumb to that, I say it's me, I chose that, then I learn faster. So that's part one. Part two, which seems totally counterintuitive, is have massive empathy for how other people came to their ideas. Not what you think they should do, who they are, how they came to their own things, what the pain they're in, and why they might believe the thing they believe. and just have empathy. And when you combine those two things, you're able to, the empathy allows you to understand the world that somebody else is going through, so you can solve their pain in a different way. It doesn't mean agreeing with them, but it means totally understanding how they came to their position. And so combining those two together gives you almost superpowers of learning and connecting with what the world looks around you, so you can connect really positive product market fits.
Yeah, absolutely love that, Jeff. And it reminds me of our chat on Saturday, where you shared your 10 questions that you are affirmations for you every day. And do you want to just touch on one or two of those to help some of us, help us with that notion of really it's about what we do as individuals and how we might
sure
benefit.
And you're going to share them with your audience afterwards?
Yeah, Liesl, actually, we've got them there, Liesl.
It's okay. I can go through them. So again, for
No
30 years, I've been, so am I putting thought into action? Am I setting new and interesting goals? Am I visualizing my goals? Am I stretching my comfort zone? Am I happy with what I have? Am I filling my mind with positive self-talk? Am I being a positive force for others? Are my actions the same as my values? Am I staying in balance? And am I focused and persistent? And one of the things that you just said, Craig, and actually I see it here, your daily affirmations. These are not affirmations for me. Affirmations would be I am. Okay. And it forces your brain to almost lie to yourself. Okay. Am I?
So you're questioning it. Yeah.
Am I forces my subconscious to, and just so you know, I can't answer all the time yes on all of these things, or in the past have not been able to answer. It's a road to get better and better and better. And so with no guilt or anything else, it just forces a question before I go to sleep. How do I do this better again tomorrow? And through that process, you realize that just about everything in your life you create. And you have the same time as the most brilliant people around, or you have the same time in every day. And it's how you choose to spend that time, whether it's small steps at first, and understanding that reinforce on itself. So these have been really important in my life. But I don't know if when I started, 32 years, morning and night, read these, and if I gave up in day 5, there would have been no change.
Wow. That's really powerful. Thanks so much, Jeff. And we've got quite a lot of questions, but I wanted to just play this quick video and then make a statement before.
Craig, did you select your sounds when you shared?
No, just hold on a sec. Sorry, I didn't do that. So I have to exit and stop sharing and select sound. Sorry about that. Share sound and go back. And we're almost there.
The ITER tokamak consists of a dizzying array of components, from its innovative heating and cooling systems to the plasma-facing units that bear the immense thermal and electromagnetic forces unleashed inside the machine to create the fusion reaction. But in its heart will live 3 sets of giant magnets: the 360-ton D-shaped toroidal field magnets, or TF coils, procured by Europe and Japan, the ring-shaped poloidal field magnets, or PF coils, supplied by Europe and Russia, and the 17-meter-tall central solenoid produced in the United States. Coordinating with other coils inside and outside the vacuum vessel, these magnets will confine the superhot plasma along magnetic field lines, causing ions inside to fuse together and release energy.
So this ITER project is pretty mind-boggling, and you, please have a look on Google and see what they're up to. But the point I really wanted to make is, as I discovered this, I was like, wow, where are we going? We're talking here about abundant free energy from nuclear fusion, but of course the fundamental issue that they'll still have is distribution. And then I came across an entrepreneur who has researched and found that the pistol shrimp, so this is literally a shrimp, imagine like a prawn, a pistol shrimp, when it pinces, it also creates a miniature nuclear fusion reaction. And he's now started, and I'll share the link with all of you, he started as an entrepreneur investigating how he might use the concept of how the pistol shrimp is actually creating nuclear fusion to miniaturize everything that ITER has done so that you don't have the distribution problem. So, that's the kind of thing that could well be possible in Africa. So there's the link to energy gain fusion on a miniaturized basis. Jeff, I don't know if you want to say anything more before we go to questions. We've got quite a few questions, and I'm thinking perhaps even there's one or two people that have been pretty dominant in the questions. So let me just try and pick up on one or two of them. So Gwen, you were talking about the application of blockchain and IoT to enable market access and value chain traceability. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's an example of multiple technologies layering to create traceability from farm to fork, as it were. Indeed, accelerate automation as much as possible, focus more on R&D. Jeff made the point that R&D is increasingly free. And one of the things there that many of us are aware of, if you're part of the OpenEXO community, is XPRIZE, and how XPRIZE has reduced the cost of R&D absolutely dramatically because, and Elon Musk announced a contribution to an XPRIZE just last week. Jeff, do you want to pick up on that a little bit?
Which was that the carbon one?
Yes. Removing carbon. I actually couldn't remember which one it was. Removing carbon from the air. Exactly.
Yeah. And so to me, and I understand a whole bunch of entrepreneurs, I understand the concept of making that work. We're talking about something different here, right? So we're talking about how do I create a business, not how do I apply for a prize? How do I use my skill sets on somebody else's prize? You're talking about trying to create something different, which there's nothing wrong with that. The X Prize is a really great idea to global knowledge. It's about information, seeing what the best is and putting them through a funnel for a prize. And typically what ends up happening is the output is far better than the prize they give away. But if you're competing for a prize, it means you're competing with a global content for that. And so what we're talking about here is building lasting value in your own market is different. It's creating something else.
Absolutely. Okay, and then Guy, you had quite a lot of comments. Guy, if you'd like to come on, I'm more than happy. We've got a bit of time. If you'd like to pick up on one or two of your comments, are you there, Guy?
Yeah, I am. Thanks a lot. Found it fascinating and really appreciate it. I've made a comment that sounds a little bit about too much being a bean counter with grey hair and glasses. I'm one. And that is contribution per limiting factor is the most important thing that I learned in 7 years at university. And it's like Eli Goldratt's goal. If you want to read the novel, but I'd go to University of Google and get the contribution per limiting factor, understanding that's important. And then I made the point in terms of education, early childhood development is really, really important. And that's where we nurture our soft skills. And in South Africa, and I'm pretty sure in the US as well, most of those soft skills that are nurtured at home or at ECD get beaten out of us when we go to school, because they don't want people to be applying their soft skills. And then put a plug in for TVETs, TVET colleges, the hard skills, what I call the grease under the fingernails skills, the oil skills, the hair oil, the cooking oil, the machine oil, and sorry, I've forgotten the fourth one. But anyway, yeah, but absolutely fascinating, and I really appreciate it, and congrats to all of the people who put this together. Well done.
Thank you.
Thanks, Guy. I mean, Jeff, you made that point about curiosity. Do you want to just re-emphasize it?
Yeah, and so that those questions or anything else, or the people that you're around, allow you to stay humble and curious. And so what you do with your curiosity, whether it's find a free education through the more you do, the more time you spend there looking for patterns that don't make sense, the more you'll be able to connect those patterns to others. So I think, funny, Craig, that is actually one of the things, what I would say it was one of the biggest learnings for myself. A lot of the times where I thought it was something else, I thought it was a business thing, I thought it was a relationship thing, it wasn't. It was me. And so my biggest breakthroughs that enabled everything else were the things I never saw in myself, and nobody would have told me that if I didn't take responsibility, it wouldn't. So now I try to I look for things that are true in all of us. So we all have bias. We all believe, we all easily can get trapped into this is holding me back. This is holding me back, and the excuses of the reasons why we should be exactly where we are. And they're mostly fabrications in our mind to keep us exactly stasis. And so if that's true for me, it's probably, and it's true for everybody I see, it's probably true for everybody, and I need to watch out for it. So those watching out for it just kind of increase my curiosity, not just for things, whether it's physics or whether it's coding or technology or anything else, not just things. I'm interested in all those things, but also how I show up in every relationship or anything else. And those often are way bigger things than the knowledge gained in a certain industry.
Absolutely. And Sanjay, I don't know if you want to pop on quickly. You had quite a few interesting comments. Are you there, Sanjay, or should I pick up on one or two of them? Sanjay there. Liesl, do you see him?
Sanjay had to leave earlier.
Oh, did he have to leave? Okay.
Hi guys, sorry.
You're still here. Awesome.
Sanjay's back.
Yeah, I've had a split personality. My personality had to split with me a few minutes ago. It's back together. Thank you. Thanks, Craig. Thanks, everybody. I mean, this has been a very interesting conversation. I think, I just maybe want to put this point on the table. Everybody talks about bringing investment and getting investment and bringing money into your space, and have a slightly different maybe line of thinking that says there's already enough money in your space. There's enough money in our space. It's all around us. My question is, how are we bringing together the pennies that make the pounds in order to move us forward? We keep on saying, I need to bring investment in from the US or from America or from China. And please pardon the way I'm going to say this, but at the end of the day, you become more dependent upon those. So, when I listen to everything that Jeff said, and if I think about, I put that earlier comment on there, we've got the youngest population on the planet. The average age in Africa, according to a study done, it was 18 months ago, is just under 25. We've got 30% of the world's global resources on this continent. And together with that, we've got this massive unemployment. That for me is the perfect storm. It's the perfect opportunity for us to create. So, just listening to what Jeff was saying earlier on, it's not about what they all do, but what can I do? How can I move this forward? And I think if we can just apply that line of thinking and take accountability, take responsibility, and each of us do something. I think, 1 billion people in Africa.
Yeah.
If everybody finds a way to just create a dollar's worth of revenue and income, there's $1 billion. You know, create a multiplier effect. That's just
awesome.
pretty much
Thanks for that, Sanjay. And then just for a last one, Lana, you wanted to ask a question, and then we need to wrap up.
Thanks, Craig. Hi, everybody. Hi, Jeff and everybody. So you're talking about an entrepreneurial mindset, and you speak about I'm responsible for everything in my life, which is correct. But what does that really mean? It means that if I accept a responsibility, I'm no longer a victim. And when you're no longer a victim and you are now a victor, everything changes. So South Africa, or Africa, I think, is a continent of people who feel victimized. And in terms of our government, is in a way that's what they like to keep us as victims, because it means that they increase their coffers of things. They install policies such as BBBE. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
Let's not go there. But I like the point.
Okay.
Lana, just let me.
Sure.
I like the point of that. You know, actually the system. Let's not say the government. Let's say the system keeps us victim. Jeff, I know you've written about that, and I've heard you talk about that. Do you want to close off on that point?
Yeah, and it is true. That's why I say I have empathy for what that looks like. But if you believe that, it is true for you. And so it's such a fundamental change, because you live in this is one of the things that I've said kind of to I'll tell the story really quickly. We all know a victim. You might know a whole bunch of victims that tell a story about why they can't succeed over and over and over again, or why. And what typically ends up happening with that person in your life, you don't tell them. And over time, it becomes too hard. And so you move away. And so what were you really saying? And what they don't know what they're doing is they have such a pain or need to belong and everything else, and they want to be heard, that they're pushing away everybody with all of their might, and nobody tells them. So they're pushing away the very thing they want the most, while blaming everybody else around them for doing it. And then what typically happens with that victim is when everybody moves away and they can't handle it anymore, that person doubles down and creates more drama. And so I find myself, I think, but by the way, just on a different side, the person who chases money at all costs and says, well, I'm going to work and work and work and work and work, and it's all about money, does exactly the same thing on the other side. They're telling them a story, their belief system about what they need to feel validated. That's what they're doing. And they'll do whatever it takes, because at first they're validated for that. Just like you validate the victim because you feel sorry for them. Just like they hold people that make a lot of money on a pedestal, and those people on a pedestal, they don't want to leave the pedestal. So they keep on doing the same thing to try to retain that. And nobody tells either of those people what's happening. So if you, in your life, have people around that'll tell you the real truth. Tell them, turn their sign around so they can see what they're doing, and you tell have people tell you the same thing that you're doing, and you'll learn at a faster rate.
Awesome, thanks, Jeff. That's so powerful, and I guess, and I hope that's part of what we're trying to do in this democratizing entrepreneurship community. So if you want to follow up and follow through with us, we've set up this link, and you can scan the QR code to have a 30-minute chat with any of the panel members that might have said something that you really that really intrigued you, and we'll support you to follow through in this way. Liesl, would you like to talk to this one with Jodi's masterclass next week?
For us, before my lip starts moving and nothing comes out or cries. Yes, absolutely. Jeff, thank you. This was wonderful, and we're going to give you some more thanks in a moment. Again, next week, monetize your inner voice, and I think it's also very typical and leads on very well from today's conversation and the great points that Jeff has made. It starts with me, and that's exactly what Jody is going to help us with next week. So register. Also, you can scan the QR code there. I've shared the registration links for this event, as well as the follow-up from the previous slide, also in your chat. Join us. Follow through on the advice Jeff gave us. Please join us next week, Friday.
Awesome.
Thanks,
thank you so much. And you can also scan this code to join our Democratizing Entrepreneurship community. And then there's a couple of other assets here. So there's the past events asset, where, as we've recorded today, everything's been recorded, and we've sliced and diced it into knowledge nuggets that are available out there for free. The Democratizing Entrepreneurship YouTube channel has got all of this stuff on it. And then I've created the best of Jeff Booth's YouTube playlist, which the ones that I really pick up on and find highly relevant to what we're trying to do, I add to that. So get on, subscribe to that as well. And then if you want to help us to develop the entrepreneurial brain, which is our framework for democratizing entrepreneurship, then join our Democratizing Entrepreneurship community. So that's it. Thank you so much, Jeff. You've been absolutely insightful and inspiring as always. I really appreciate your time and the fact that it was 7 a.m. in Toronto. Some people might not have realized that. Thanks so much for joining us and for contributing to our efforts to democratize entrepreneurship in Africa.
Thanks a lot, everybody.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks
to the panel. Thanks to the panel, guys. As always, we keep moving the needle forward, one knowledge nugget at a time. Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye, everybody. Have a wonderful